Hello and welcome to At Home with LMP. Today it's Mozart Monday and I'm Ruth Rogers, one of the leaders of the orchestra. I would like to talk to you about Mozart's Violin Concerto number 3 in G major, a very charming piece in my opinion. And I'm going to start by reading you a letter that was written to Mozart's sister from a violinist, reminiscing about a time when Wolfgang was a very little boy. And I would like to say that there is no offence meant to any second violinists anywhere. So it reads like this. Little Wolfgang asked to be allowed to play second violin. As he hadn't had any lessons yet, your papa reproved him for his silly begging, thinking he would be unable to make anything of it. Wolfgang said, "You don't need to have taken lessons to play second violin." When your papa insisted that he go away at once and not bother us, he began to cry and went off in a sulk with his little fiddle. I asked that he be allowed to play alongside of me. At last your papa said, "Play along with them then, but so softly that you can't be heard, or you'll have to go." Soon I noticed to my amazement that I was superfluous. Quietly I laid my violin aside and watched your papa, who had tears of wonder and pleasure running down his cheeks. Little Wolfgang played through all 6 trios. He was so elated by our applause that he said he could play the first violin part. We let him do it for a joke and almost died of laughter. His fingering was incorrect and improvised, but he never got stuck. Wow, can you imagine what Mozart must have been like as a child? What an incredible child, such a precocious talent. Anyway, Mozart was 19 when he wrote this violin concerto, written in 1775. It is a work of considerable charm, as I mentioned, and a fine example of how Mozart was experimenting with adventurous ideas while still adhering to an essentially Rococo classical idiom. You probably know, because you're such an educated bunch, that 8 violin concerti have been credited to Mozart, but only the first 5 have been authenticated. Now, they were all written in 12 months, which is an extraordinary output. In fact, it would be an extraordinary output if he'd been only composing. But not only was he composing, he was doing all sorts of other things as well. He was working as concertmaster for the Prince Archbishop of Salzburg's Royal Orchestra, and his duties were extensive. They included co-conducting, playing, and composing special requests for the Archbishop's pleasure and for his parties. So he must have been a very busy young man. He also had a dollop of defiance aimed at a man he called Archbishop Booby, who he hated for his tyrannical attitude and because he basically treated Mozart as a servant, insisted that he eat with the maids and footmen, and paid him a paltry sum. He did not make him feel valued. There was constant tension and fighting between them, and Mozart felt oppressed, infuriated, and trapped. Still, listen to the vibrant opening of the concerto. You don't hear much of that oppression or frustration. It's full of joy and hope and positive spirit. We could definitely do with lashings of these qualities at the moment during this pandemic. So just have a listen to the opening tutti of the first movement. Wow, such energized music. You might be interested to know that the opening of the first movement is based on an aria called Air Tranquillo from Il Re Pastore, the Shepherd King, which, as you probably know, because as I've already said, you're such an educated bunch, is a light opera written a year earlier than the Violin Concerto. The main character of this opera loves being a shepherd and does not know he is of royal blood. The implied mixture of nobility and carefree contentment encapsulates the characterization of the concerto movement and perhaps encapsulates the essence of Mozart to a certain extent. Have a listen to this. Here's the aria Air Tranquillo from Il Re Pastore. Now feels like the moment to thank Harmonia Mundi for allowing us to play the recording we're referring to of the Violin Concerto, which features Isabel Faust, Giovanni Antonini and Il Giardino Armonico. It was interesting trying to choose a recording to refer to because of course there are many and they're all very different. You know, some of the great masters of the violin, some of the older recordings are fantastic musically, but they're very romantic in their interpretation. And what I think Isabel Faust finds is a real stylistic awareness in her playing. Now, I would urge you, when you can, to listen to the whole recording, but I know that you're all busy people, and so I'm trying to keep this fairly concise for you because I know you've all got things to do and places to be. But I did want you to hear her cadenza, which is very virtuosic and interesting. And I was just looking at my music and seeing all the different cadenzas that are printed in this Bärenreiter copy. So there's one by Martin Wulfhorst, one by Isai, and then there's the quite famous one by Leopold Auer, and the one that most people play, including me, by Sam Franco. So there's quite a choice of things, and then obviously some people write their own cadenzas or ask someone else to write a cadenza. Anyway, have a listen to this. I'm sure you're going to be blown away. The second movement of this concerto is absolutely stunning. The noted Mozart scholar Alfred Einstein described this as, quote, an adagio that seems to have fallen straight from heaven. Now, as I've mentioned before, it was tricky to choose which recording to refer to, and there are many, and there are many of great quality. What I love about how Isabel Faust plays this second movement is she plays it with a simplicity that allows the music to glow. And it reminded me of a time my teacher said to me that with some music, In the same way that a truly beautiful woman doesn't need makeup and perfume, some musical passages are already so remarkable that they don't need to be overcooked in terms of phrasing and vibrato. Have a listen to this, you'll see what I mean. Mozart wrote a letter to his father, and in it he referred to this concerto as the Strasburger concert. And researchers believe this epithet comes from the opening orchestral motive in the third movement. Now, the third movement is a local minuet-like dance that had already appeared as a tune in a symphony by, wait for it, I love this name, Karl Ditters von Dittersdorf. Sounds like somebody out of The Sound of Music. The third movement is a bright rondo, and it's what I'd love you to hear in full at the end of this drivel of mine. But listen out, because there's this startling moment in the middle when suddenly the music is stopped mid-flow, and it just comes out of nowhere. And Mozart drops into slower ideas. One of them is based on a Hungarian folk tune, and suddenly the meter changes to 2/2. And it feels like a gavotte. It's sort of like a movement within a movement, if you like. And then the surprise episode finishes just as suddenly as it began, and the jolly opening returns as if nothing had happened. Listen out as well for the winds. I love the way Mozart uses the winds in this concerto. The use of the oboe as a colour is just amazing, and they have quite a prominent role towards the end of the piece, as you'll hear. It's possibly worth noting that early performances of this work would have included a harpsichord, and that would have been probably quite a different effect to the one we hear now. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this bit of chat about this piece. I know you will enjoy this lovely recording we're about to play you. So sit back and enjoy the third movement of Mozart's Violin Concerto No. 3 in G major, and I do hope to be able to see some of you in real life soon. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.